What if I told you that every problem you're facing right now, every obstacle, every struggle, every seemingly insurmountable challenge, doesn't actually exist in the way you think it does? What if the very act of fighting against your problems is precisely what gives them power over your life? This might sound impossible, perhaps even offensive to someone in the midst of real suffering, but stay with me, because what you're about to discover about consciousness and reality might completely transform how you approach every difficulty you'll ever face. Smith Wigglesworth, a man whose very name resonates with spiritual authority and miraculous demonstrations, uncovered something that shook the foundations of how humanity understands problems. While most people spend their entire lives wrestling with circumstances, exhausting themselves in endless battles against external conditions, Wigglesworth discovered a truth so profound, so revolutionary, that it seemed almost too simple to be
real. Problems exist only in human consciousness, never in divine reality. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Think about it for a moment. Has this ever happened to you? You face a challenge, and immediately,
your mind begins constructing an entire narrative around it. Worst-case scenarios, feelings of inadequacy, memories of past failures, projections of future disaster. The problem grows in your consciousness, becoming more real, more threatening, more overwhelming with each passing thought. You try harder. You struggle more intensely. You fight with everything you have, and yet somehow, the problem persists or even multiplies. This is the trap that Wigglesworth recognized, the endless cycle that keeps humanity bound to suffering. But here's where it gets fascinating. Wigglesworth identified something that most people never realize in their entire lifetime. Consciousness itself operates on two completely distinct levels. There's the human level of consciousness, the one we're all familiar with, where separation feels real, where problems appear solid and threatening, where limitations seem absolute and unchangeable. This is the consciousness that perceives lack, disease, conflict, and impossibility as genuine realities. And then there's something else entirely, something that exists simultaneously, yet remains hidden from most people's awareness. Divine consciousness, where only wholeness exists, where perfection is the only reality, where harmony is not an achievement but the natural state of being. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because Wigglesworth didn't just theorize about this. He demonstrated it repeatedly, proving that when you stop identifying with human limitation and recognize your true spiritual nature, problems don't just become easier to handle, they actually lose their power over you completely and permanently. The transformation happens not by changing your external circumstances first, but by changing the very consciousness that creates and maintains those circumstances from within your own awareness. So the question becomes, if problems only exist in one level of consciousness, and you have the ability to shift to a different level, where those problems cannot exist, then what? Then what becomes possible in your life? This is where Wigglesworth's approach becomes truly revolutionary, because he didn't just identify the problem. He gave us a practical method, a specific technique that anyone can apply in the very moment crisis strikes. He called it the sacred pause, and it's one of those hidden truths that sounds almost too simple to be powerful. Yet it contains within it the capacity to completely alter the trajectory of any situation you're facing. Here's how most people operate. Something goes wrong and instantly there's a cascade of reactions. Fear floods the system. The mind immediately begins calculating solutions, analyzing what went wrong, trying to figure out how to fix it, control it, manipulate it back into acceptable conditions. It's exhausting, isn't it? And more often than not, this frantic mental activity only amplifies the very problem we're trying to solve. Wigglesworth recognized that this immediate reaction is actually the mechanism that locks us into human consciousness, that lower level where problems feel absolutely real and overwhelming. The sacred pause interrupts this entire pattern. Instead of reacting, instead of immediately jumping into problem-solving mode, you deliberately stop. You create space. And in that space, you ask yourself one transformative question. What is the spiritual truth about this situation that transcends all human appearances? This isn't about denying what you're experiencing or pretending everything is fine when it clearly isn't. This is about shifting your perspective from the human level of consciousness, where the problem exists, to the divine level, where an entirely different reality is already present and operating. If this resonates with you, go ahead and subscribe. There's so much more we're exploring together, and I want to make sure these insights reach you when you need them most. Think about the impact of this shift. When you pause and ask that question, you're essentially changing the entire framework through which you're perceiving your circumstances. You're no longer trapped in the mindset of limitation, of human struggle, of impossibility. You're opening yourself to receive guidance, revelation, understanding from a dimension of consciousness that operates beyond the rules and restrictions of ordinary thinking. This is where the journey gets fascinating, because Wigglesworth emphasized something that goes against everything our culture teaches us about solving problems. We're taught to force solutions, to push harder, to exert willpower, to manipulate circumstances through sheer mental effort and determination. But Wigglesworth discovered something completely different. He found that true transformation doesn't come through force. It comes through receptivity. You're not trying to make something happen. You're not struggling to create an outcome. Instead, you become like a flower, opening to sunlight, completely receptive to the spiritual truth that already exists about your situation. This receptivity is the hidden mechanism behind every genuine miracle, every authentic breakthrough, every moment when solutions appear that exceed anything you could have designed through human thinking alone. When you stop forcing and start receiving, when you release the grip of control and open your consciousness to divine intelligence, you create space for revelations that transform everything. The problem doesn't just get solved, it actually dissolves, because you're no longer operating from the level of consciousness where it had power in the first place. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because there's a specific recognition that makes this entire process not just possible, but inevitable. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for this shift," because what comes next will show you exactly how this recognition changes everything about how you experience reality itself, and why certain people seem to live in a completely different world than others, even when facing the same circumstances. The recognition that Wigglesworth emphasized is both beautifully simple and infinitely profound. It's contained in a single statement that has the power to transform your entire existence. I and the Father are one. Now, when you first hear this, your logical mind might try to dismiss it as religious language, as metaphorical poetry, as something abstract and disconnected from your actual daily struggles. But here's the hidden truth behind this recognition. It's not a statement you need to make true through effort or willpower. It's already true. It's always been true. The only question is whether you're aware of it or not. This oneness means something very specific and practical for your life right now. It means that divine wisdom, infinite power, and unconditional love aren't things you need to earn, achieve, or become worthy of receiving. They are your true spiritual nature in this very moment. Think about the impact of genuinely recognizing this. If problems cannot exist in divine consciousness, and they can't, because divine consciousness only knows wholeness and perfection, then problems cannot truly exist in you when you know who you really are beyond the temporary appearances your physical senses are reporting. This is the shift in mindset that changes everything. You're not trying to become something you're not. You're recognizing what you've always been. Underneath the layers of human conditioning, fear, and limitation, this recognition doesn't require enormous effort or years of spiritual practice. It happens through awareness, through a simple shift in how you perceive yourself and your relationship to divine reality. And when this awareness stabilizes in your consciousness, when it becomes your default way of experiencing yourself, your entire world reflects that transformation back to you in tangible, undeniable ways. Let me share something concrete with you, because I know this might sound theoretical. There was a woman named Maria whose story demonstrates exactly how this recognition operates in real circumstances. She was facing complete financial devastation, the kind of crisis that would break most people. Her business partner had vanished overnight, taking every dollar they had, leaving her with crushing debt and what appeared to be absolutely no way forward. Every logical decision pointed toward bankruptcy, failure, the end of everything she'd built. The pressure was suffocating. The fear was overwhelming. This was not an abstract spiritual exercise for Maria. This was her actual life collapsing in real time. But Maria had encountered Wigglesworth's teachings, and in that moment of crisis, she made a decision that went against every instinct of human survival consciousness. She paused. She didn't panic. She didn't immediately start scrambling for solutions through sheer willpower. Instead, she applied this recognition we've been talking about. She recognized that divine abundance was her true spiritual nature, not the temporary financial appearances her bank account was showing. She didn't deny that the money was gone. She simply refused to accept that lack was the deeper truth about her identity and her relationship to infinite supply. And here's what's remarkable. Within just a few weeks, opportunities began appearing that seemed completely impossible given her circumstances. New business partnerships formed, seemingly out of nowhere. Assets she had completely forgotten about were suddenly recovered. Solutions emerged that didn't just patch the problem temporarily, they expanded her financial reality beyond what she had experienced before the crisis even happened. She didn't force any of this. She didn't manipulate people or circumstances. She maintained the consciousness of abundance while taking whatever inspired action felt natural, and divine intelligence orchestrated the details in ways her human thinking could never have designed. But what was really happening behind the scenes of Maria's transformation? What's the mechanism that allows this shift in consciousness to produce such concrete results in physical reality? Write in the comments, "Abundance is my nature," if you're beginning to sense how this applies to your own journey. Because understanding this mechanism is crucial for making these principles work consistently in every area of your life, not just occasionally or by accident. The mechanism becomes even clearer when you look at situations where human willpower seems completely useless, where no amount of effort appears capable of changing the outcome. Consider David's story, because this one hits differently. After 20 years of marriage, everything was falling apart. Not gradually, not with hope of repair, but catastrophically. Professional counseling had failed. Every conversation ended in conflict. Communication had broken down so completely that divorce wasn't just likely. It seemed like the only sane option left for both of them. The emotional exhaustion, the accumulated resentment, the patterns that had calcified over 2 decades. How do you even begin to address something that deeply broken? Here's where David made a decision that went against everything conventional relationship advice would tell you. He stopped fighting for the relationship through human will. He stopped trying to change his wife's behavior, stopped attempting to fix their problems through discussions, compromises, or any of the usual strategies people employ when marriages are dying. Instead, he applied Wigglesworth's principle of releasing personal will entirely and aligning with divine will. He consistently recognized that divine love was their true spiritual nature beneath all the human personality conflicts, all the accumulated hurts, all the incompatible patterns that had developed over the years. This wasn't passive resignation or giving up. This was something far more powerful. He stopped seeing his wife through the lens of her flaws, her mistakes, her failures as a partner. He began recognizing the spiritual identity they both shared, the divine love that existed beyond every human limitation. And something extraordinary happened. The old patterns of conflict didn't get resolved through therapy or hard conversations. They simply dissolved, naturally, without force. The marriage wasn't just saved in some minimal, functional way. It was completely reborn. In spiritual understanding, becoming stronger and more harmonious than it had been even in their best years together. The transformation happened because David shifted the consciousness he was bringing to the relationship. And consciousness is what creates and maintains every circumstance in our experience. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, that's beautiful for relationships and finances, but what about when you're facing something physical, something medical, something where your body is giving you concrete evidence that something is terribly wrong? This is where Sarah's journey becomes absolutely crucial to understand. She received the kind of medical news that stops time, devastating diagnosis, immediate surgery required, uncertain outcomes, the whole nightmare scenario that makes even the most spiritually grounded person question everything they believe. The fear was real. The physical symptoms were undeniable. The medical tests showed exactly what the doctors said they showed. Sarah wasn't living in some fantasy where she pretended the diagnosis didn't exist. But here's what she did that changed everything. She remembered Wigglesworth's teachings in that moment of crisis. She recognized that divine perfection was her true state of being, not the physical symptoms her body was currently displaying. She maintained the consciousness of wholeness, not in opposition to the medical team, but while working cooperatively with them. She didn't abandon practical wisdom. She simply refused to accept disease as the final truth about her spiritual identity. The results defied medical explanation. Her tests began improving dramatically, in ways her doctors couldn't account for through any known biological mechanism. The surgery that had been presented as urgent and unavoidable became completely unnecessary. Her own doctor, after 30 years of medical practice, called it the most remarkable recovery he had ever witnessed. What happened behind the scenes? Here, what's the hidden truth that allows consciousness to override what appears to be fixed physical reality? Put down, divine perfection is real. If you're sensing how this principle could apply to your own health journey, or any seemingly impossible situation you're currently facing, because understanding what Wigglesworth really meant by consciousness isn't just philosophical, it's the key to experiencing breakthrough in areas where you've been stuck for years. What Wigglesworth understood, and what becomes absolutely crucial for you to grasp right now, is that consciousness operates according to a fundamental law that most people never recognize. Whatever you consistently focus upon expands in your experience. This isn't motivational speaking or positive thinking platitudes. This is a precise mechanism that governs how reality manifests in your life. When you focus on your problems, analyzing them, discussing them, worrying about them, building mental narratives around them, you're actually feeding them energy through your attention. And they multiply. They grow. They become more complex, more entrenched, more overwhelming with each moment of focused attention you give them. But here's the transformation that becomes possible when you shift that focus. When you consistently direct your attention toward divine truth instead of human problems, something remarkable happens. The problems don't just become easier to handle. They actually dissolve naturally, the way darkness disappears the moment you turn on a light. You're not fighting the darkness. You're not analyzing the darkness or developing strategies to overcome the darkness. You're simply introducing light, and the darkness has no choice but to vanish because it never had any substance in the first place. It only appeared real because of the absence of light. This is practical mysticism that produces tangible, measurable results in your actual circumstances. When you consistently practice recognizing divine truth in every situation, in your finances, your relationships, your health, your career, your entire life begins reflecting that truth back to you in concrete ways. The impact is cumulative. Each time you choose to focus on truth rather than appearances, you're strengthening that pathway in your consciousness, making it easier, more natural, more automatic to access that divine level of awareness where problems simply cannot exist. Now, Wigglesworth gave us a specific technique for this shift in focus that he called the spiritual treatment. And I want to be very clear about what this is because it's often misunderstood. This isn't prayer in the traditional sense, where you're asking God to please change something that's wrong, hoping that maybe if you ask nicely enough or persistently enough, circumstances will improve. That approach still operates from the consciousness that problems are real, and you need external intervention to fix them. The spiritual treatment is something entirely different. It's conscious recognition of what is already perfectly true in divine consciousness right now, in this moment, regardless of what your physical senses are reporting. Here's how this works in practice. You declare spiritual facts about your situation with absolute conviction, not hoping they might become true someday if you believe hard enough, not wishing they were true while secretly doubting, but recognizing and feeling their reality deeply, knowing they are true at the level of divine consciousness, which is the only level where permanent reality exists. If you're facing financial pressure, your treatment isn't, "Please God, send me money," or "I hope my situation improves." Your treatment is, "Divine abundance is my true nature right now." Lack exists only in human belief, never in divine reality. I recognize my complete oneness with infinite supply in this moment. The power of this treatment lies in its ability to systematically replace problem thoughts with truth. Thoughts in your consciousness. Every time a worry arises, every time fear tries to reassert itself, every time appearances suggest that nothing is changing, you immediately return to the treatment. You're retraining your mind, building new neural pathways, establishing different patterns of perception that align with spiritual reality rather than human limitation. This consistency is what creates the breakthrough. This is where the real work happens, not in changing your external circumstances through force, but in transforming the consciousness that's generating those circumstances from within your own awareness. Right, I choose truth over appearances. If you're ready to apply this method to whatever challenge you're facing right now, because what comes next will show you exactly how to amplify this practice into something that operates automatically in your life, creating consistent demonstrations of divine power that others will start calling miraculous, but you'll recognize as simply the natural result of aligned consciousness. After you've done the spiritual treatment, after you've declared the truth and replaced those problem thoughts with recognition of divine reality, there's a crucial next step that Wigglesworth emphasized, and it's one that most people completely skip because they're too anxious for immediate results. You become very still. You listen, not with your physical ears, but with what Wigglesworth called the listening ear, that faculty of spiritual awareness that picks up guidance, direction, and wisdom from divine intelligence itself. This is where the journey gets deeply personal, because the guidance you receive won't look the same for everyone. It might come as intuition, that sudden knowing that emerges without logical explanation. It might arrive as inspiration, where an idea appears in your mind that feels different from your usual thinking. Fresher, clearer, somehow carrying more authority. Sometimes it's just a quiet inner direction about what specific action to take next, what decision to make, which path to follow. The key is recognizing that divine intelligence is actively communicating the perfect solution to you through your spiritual awareness in this very moment. Your job isn't to figure everything out through mental gymnastics or endless analysis. Your job is becoming quiet enough, still enough, receptive enough to receive what's already being transmitted to you. This is active spiritual receptivity, not passive waiting or hoping something magical might happen. You've set the stage through your treatment, through your recognition of truth. Now you're opening yourself to receive the practical wisdom about how that truth manifests in your specific circumstances. And here's what's fascinating. The guidance that comes often surprises you. It's rarely what human logic would suggest. Sometimes it seems too simple. Sometimes it appears counterintuitive. But when you follow that inner direction, when you trust what comes through that listening ear, you discover pathways and possibilities that your rational mind could never have conceived or designed. But receiving the guidance is only part of the equation. What separates those who experience consistent transformation from those who only get occasional glimpses of breakthrough is what Wigglesworth called maintaining the vision. After you receive that spiritual insight, after divine intelligence has shown you the truth about your situation, you hold that vision steady and unwavering regardless of what temporary appearances might suggest. This is where most people stumble. They get the insight. They feel the truth of it. They experience that moment of clarity and conviction. Then circumstances don't immediately change, and they abandon the vision, falling back into problem consciousness. Maintaining the vision doesn't mean ignoring practical steps or refusing to acknowledge what's happening around you. It means taking those practical steps from an entirely different consciousness, from the consciousness of the solution rather than the consciousness of the problem. You're not acting from desperation, hoping that maybe if you do everything right, things might work out. You're acting from knowing, from wholeness, from the absolute certainty that divine consciousness has already established the perfect outcome, and your physical experience is simply catching up to that reality. Think about the impact this has on your decisions, your energy, your entire approach to action. When you maintain the vision while taking practical steps, there's no anxiety driving your behavior. There's no frantic energy of trying to make something happen through sheer force. You move with calm confidence, guided by that inner knowing, trusting that divine intelligence is orchestrating details and opening doors that you can't even see yet. This steady recognition, this unwavering vision, is what gradually transforms the entire situation from within. What began as an overwhelming problem becomes a demonstration of how consciousness creates reality when it aligns with divine truth rather than human limitation. Right. I maintain the vision if you're committed to holding steady, even when appearances suggest nothing is changing, because what's happening behind the scenes during those times when you can't see progress is actually the most critical part of your transformation. There's one more element that completes everything we've been discussing, and it's so powerful that Wigglesworth considered it essential for activating the manifestation of spiritual truth in your physical experience. It's the practice of giving thanks in advance. Not gratitude for what you can see with your eyes, not appreciation for results that have already materialized, but heartfelt thankfulness for the spiritual solution that divine consciousness has already established in truth, even before any evidence appears in your circumstances. This might feel counterintuitive at first. How can you be genuinely thankful for something you can't see yet? Something that your bank account, your body, your relationships aren't currently reflecting. But here's the hidden mechanism behind this practice. When you're truly grateful for divine provision, when you feel authentic appreciation for the perfection that exists at the level of divine consciousness, you're not hoping it might happen someday. You're acknowledging that it's already real, already complete, already established. This thankful consciousness becomes naturally magnetic to solutions and demonstrations. You're aligning yourself vibrationally, emotionally, spiritually with the reality you're recognizing, and that alignment is what allows it to manifest in your physical experience. Think about how you feel when you're genuinely grateful versus when you're desperately hoping or anxiously waiting. Gratitude carries a completely different energy. It's peaceful. It's confident. It's settled. When you thank divine consciousness for the abundance that's already yours, for the healing that's already complete, for the solution that's already in place, you're embodying the consciousness of having received rather than the consciousness of lack and need. And consciousness is what creates your experience. This isn't manipulation or pretending. This is recognizing the spiritual truth of what already exists and feeling the natural appreciation that comes with that recognition. But I want to be completely honest with you about something, because if I don't address this, you'll encounter it on your journey and might think you're doing something wrong. The biggest challenge you'll face in applying Wigglesworth's method is persistent doubt during that lag time between spiritual recognition and physical manifestation. You recognize the truth. You do the treatment. You listen for guidance. You maintain the vision. You give thanks in advance. And then, nothing seems to change immediately. Days pass, maybe weeks, and the circumstances still look exactly the same or possibly even worse. This is when doubt creeps in, whispering that maybe this doesn't work, maybe you're fooling yourself, maybe you should abandon spiritual consciousness and return to human problem solving. Wigglesworth taught something crucial about this phase. Divine consciousness operates completely outside human time limitations. Your recognition of truth is instantly real and complete in the spiritual realm. The appearance of that truth in your physical experience follows according to spiritual law, but it often works invisibly in consciousness before becoming evident externally. The delay isn't because the method doesn't work. The delay is simply part of how consciousness manifests its contents into physical form. When doubt arises, and it will, you simply return gently to the truth you recognized earlier. No self-criticism, no frustration, just a gentle redirection of your attention back to divine reality. Doubt is nothing more than a habit of human thinking, a pattern that's been reinforced over years or decades of problem-focused consciousness. It dissolves through consistent practice of recognizing truth over circumstances, the same way any habit weakens through non-use while new patterns strengthen through repetition. Every time you choose truth over doubt, you're building that spiritual muscle, establishing divine consciousness as your default state of awareness. The doubt loses its grip naturally as your conviction in spiritual reality grows stronger through demonstration after demonstration. Put down truth over doubt if you're committed to this practice even during those challenging periods when nothing seems to be changing, because what I'm about to share will show you exactly what's happening during those times that makes all the difference between those who break through and those who give up right before their miracle manifests. What happens when you practice these principles consistently